There's lots to talk about in this, and I want to talk to Steve N. Allen, who is a broadcaster and comedian. He'll talk us through all the main stories today. Steve, it's not a good look to let out 1,700 people in one day. What do you make of this, Roy?
It is the stupidest move anyone could possibly do for so many reasons. I understand its necessity, or rather the reasons behind it, but finding a better solution is obvious. And I can't believe the Labour Party don't realise the PR disaster that they are walking into. So even before this was a scheme, it's around 25%, according to some like gov.uk stats, 25% of people released from prison reoffend. That's always the way it's been, which guarantees statistically there will be someone who will be released today, give it enough time and they will reoffend. So in the olden days, that wouldn't have even made a newspaper. Someone released from prison reoffends, no one cares. But when it's part of this scheme, as soon as the newspapers find it, it will be front page, it will be Labour's lawless land, you know, there'll be some sort of pun headline in there. They've managed to position it that they are fully owning the crisis that will be happening from these next steps. There are other solutions. I mean, I don't know, it wouldn't have been 1,700 people released, but what they could have done is released anyone who was making their way to prison because of a tweet that they sent. They still would have the criminal record. They would have had the threat of prison. They'd have learned the lesson, but you wouldn't be in a situation where you've got some nasty tweeter in prison and someone who's previously had a conviction for a violent crime who's now out on the streets again, and then the clock just ticks. We wait for them to reoffend.
It is this fairness aspect for so many people that people worry about this. And also, if you're a victim of crime and you know, despite going through the whole system, and people are waiting 2 years sometimes for murder trials, rape trials, really serious stuff, armed robbery. And then, I mean, there will be cases coming up very soon where people will be sentenced to, let's say, 5 years. They'll have spent 2 years in remand. They'll walk free from court, because that will happen. That does happen sometimes, but it's going to happen more now. Is there an alternative? What was the alternative? Did the Conservatives screw up by not building enough prison places? I mean, I think that's a fairly obvious argument, but what do you think, Steve?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not as if the Labour Party could have built any prisons for the last 14 years. You can't hold that against them. You know, there's enough damn to go around on everyone's house in these situations. And I'm surprised that would have been an easy political win, wouldn't it? It doesn't matter what year you're in. If you're any political party and you say, do you know what, we're going to build more prisons because we're tough on crime. Yeah. We're the party of law and order.
Well, Boris Johnson did say there were going to be 20,000 more prison places when I was at the Ministry of Justice, but I don't know how many of them have actually happened. There's such a crisis in the fact that there are so many foreign prisoners in prison as well. So there is a major issue. Let's talk about another one to Keir Starmer, because he's braced for a revolt over cuts to the winter fuel allowance. There will be many MPs, maybe even up to 50, perhaps as low as 30, but there will be a number of Labour MPs who are going to vote against him later. The Conservatives have put forward a motion to say that people should vote on whether this winter fuel allowance thing should go ahead. Now, it's not a binding vote, it's just an indicative vote in Parliament, which is a slightly different thing. But nonetheless, Labour are in a pickle here, because 3-4 months ago, they were saying, and they would have absolutely castigated the Conservatives for cutting winter fuel allowance. Now they're doing exactly that. Now they're in government. Another example of Labour saying one thing in opposition, saying one thing when they're running for election, and doing something very different. And I think people will see through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like last night Steve staying up too late and this morning Steve paying for it. It's amazing how you can change like that. But as one middle-aged man to another, let me give you exactly the same answer I gave to the last one. It's a stupid move. I can't believe the Labour Party can't realise the PR disaster they're walking into. Every year there are tens of thousands of people who die through the winter due to temperature-related issues, according to the official stats. Well, it's going to happen. Last year when it happened, no one put it in a newspaper. The first time the newspapers spot that there's some pensioner who dies because of heating, that's it. I mean, why would you want to own that? Why would you want to be synonymous as the party linked to pensioner cold death in a winter? And again, there must have been other ways around it. Reframe this as, should all pensioners get the winter fuel allowance? We could have a debate about where the means testing should be. I'll tell you where it shouldn't be, down at the pension credit level. Those numbers are way too small. And we're talking like 11 grand. If you've got 11 grand coming in, losing 300 quid is going to be pretty impressive, even with your 460 increase next year, as you say, after you've paid all the bills. But there would be a way to have this debate without it making it look like you don't like the pensioners because they'd have vote Tory. So they're the... I mean, look, I'll give the Labour Party some credit here. They ran a campaign saying they wouldn't tax working people. And if there's one people who aren't in that subset of working, it's people who've retired and pensioners. So in a sense, they gave us a bit of a warning.
Yeah, well, it's a cruel irony for many pensioners. And I know there are pensioners out there listening who will be affected by that, and give me a call on 0344 499 1000 if you're one of those people. It is a cruel irony that pensioners who have so few ways, often no way, to add to their income because they're on a fixed income will be the ones who will be affected by this. I interviewed the chief executive of Age UK about this, Steve, and he said that yeah, okay, look, there'll be 10 million pensioners affected by this. About 8 million of them might be all right, but 2 million of them will be really badly affected. And today, there was a government minister who was talking about this, saying, oh, it's great because we've had a 115% increase in people attempting to claim pension credits. There are 800,000 people who can get pension credits who don't. That's not a good thing. Those are desperate people. They should be entitled to that anyway, and they should get their money, and good for them if they get it, and they should get it. But 243 questions on that. You can ring them and they can go through it for you. But if you do it online, it's a 24-page thing to go through. It's so unbelievably complicated.
Well, the shocking thing about that is people who are more expert in filling in these forms says that the 273 questions is not that complicated in comparison to all the other forms. That's just a shame. We live in a world where if you want to try and claim anything, you got to, I mean, you can get a GCSE for fewer questions than that these days, which is a ridiculous state of affairs. But you're right. I mean, it does feel like bureaucracy is put in place to stop people applying for some of these things. Yes, if we could have a situation where everyone who is entitled to pension credit gets it, good. That might be one of the wins that shakes out of this. But there aren't too many wins around when, as you say, you've got 2 million people who will be losing some money that will count a lot to them. Look, there must be some be Labour about it. Tax some rich company and give that money to those 2 million people. If anything, they are looking more Tory than they've ever looked.
Well, it does feel pretty Tory, and they're doing things that the Tory government couldn't get away with it. Steve, stay there, because I want to get your reaction to what Vernon says. I'm going to talk to him in a second. Tom on WhatsApp says, I wouldn't trust Rachel Reeves with GCSE maths, never mind this country's budget. There will certainly be no growth over the next 5 years. Well, we will see. Clayton in Dartford says, remember when Shabna Mahmood, Keir Starmer and Rayner et al. Signed a petition stopping a convicted criminal from being deported, who then went on to commit further crimes and ended up back inside? Well, this whole issue of foreign criminals and prisons in general is something I want to continue to talk to Steve about, but Vernon has given me a ring from Staffordshire, 0344 499 1000. Vernon, you're the first call of the day. What would you like to say?
Gents, good afternoon.
Hi.
It's astonishing the impotence of this new government. There are 12,000 plus foreigners in prison. It's really simple. Put them on the plane, send them back. Nothing to do with the European Court of Human Rights. They're criminals. They don't deserve any human rights, and we need them out because we need not to be putting criminals back on the streets.
But imagine, Vernon, I have a lot of sympathy with your argument. What I would ask you, though, is imagine you're a victim of crime and someone is sent back somewhere where we don't have an agreement where that person will be locked up, so they could actually get their freedom in their home country. They could be sentenced to prison for, say, 25 years for murder here in the UK. But if you deport that person to, let's say for the sake of argument, the United States, well, there may not be a system where they're actually put in prison for those 25 years. They may walk free.
Peter, can I tell you something? Actually, you're a wonderful broadcaster. I couldn't care less.
Right.
I could not care less what happens to these people. They don't deserve to be. For me, Peter, spent a lot of time in Poland. If I committed a crime in Poland, I'll give me 5 minutes, they would ship me back to the UK. They wouldn't worry about the European Court of Human Rights. And as for old people, everybody that wants to justify removing this gesture that we give to them of £300 every year, hold your head in shame. It is appalling. It never happened. Older people shouldn't even be paying for anything. We should cherish the elderly, look after them and take care of them, not rob from them. Honestly, the optics are just appalling.
It is appalling. I'm not happy to be a member of a society that does that. Vernon, thank you so much for your thoughts there. Steve, what do you make of what Vernon just said there? He made a number of very interesting points, and actually one person's been in touch on WhatsApp as well, saying the reason we don't have enough prison places is that everyone wants more places but not near them.
That's true. Yes, it's NIMBYism part 2. Well, actually, if you dig down into it, it's not even the physical space, is it? It's not about not having enough buildings. It's about training people to work in the prison service for the level of training that you need for it to work well as well. I've watched some worrying news articles recently about people who just seem thoroughly in over their heads when they're surrounded by too many criminals because they've got so many, the numbers then pay attention to it. But it's an interesting point about how quickly you could free up spaces if you deported people who you can legally deport for breaking the law in this country. And I take your point. People want to see justice served. And as much as I love your thoughts on this, I think you're missing the opportunity cost, because look what happens instead. You don't have that perfect scenario of the criminal who's done wrong against you being in prison, and that's the end of it. What you have is that criminal being in prison, and therefore someone else gets let out onto the streets earlier than they should. So I think if the hardest pill we had to swallow was knowing that people were being deported and we couldn't guarantee they were in prison, I think we'd take that as a solution to the problem right now.
Really interesting debate, and both you and Vernon disagree with me, and you've made me think about that, and I'm going to think about it over the break. We're going to talk about this more.